Hello everyone, Yevi here with the Inktwell, and this week we've got an ink review of Noodler's Rome Burning. I really wanted to do a throwback to one of the first inks that I had purchased when I got into the fountain pen hobby almost a year ago. The reason I picked up this ink back then was because I wanted something permanent, and I wanted something that wasn't blue or black. And when I was looking through the catalog at Pen Chalet, I saw this brownish, goldish ink, and I was like, okay, well, I might as well give it a shot. So I went ahead, picked it up, and immediately put it into a Kaweco Extra Fine. So all those preconceived notions I had a year ago obviously are out the window because I'm using a triple broad Regalia Writing Labs epilogue nib. I also want to go ahead and put it out there right off the bat that I did receive this bottle of ink for free from Ron over at Pen Chalet for this review. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the bottle. As you can see here, it does have the, I would almost call it typical, Noodler's political motif. Unlike a lot of the other bottles, though, that have a lot of artwork going on, this is very simplistic in that you're just seeing portraits of early leaders in the American financial revolution, as well as the throwback to Julius Caesar. Overall, I would actually call this a tame bottle for the artwork. And it didn't come shipped to me almost to the point of leaking out of the bottle, which was a good thing. I was able to stick the pen in and fill my converter without it overflowing, which for me is a Noodler's first. Now, before we get into the writing sample, I wanted to go ahead and do a little bit of a color comparison with some more comparable yellows and browns in my color ring. And I had everything swatched, everything's looking good. And then I started looking through the color ring and realized I don't have a single yellow or brown or gold ink. It was maddening, truly maddening. So until I can do a follow-up video where I've actually got some golds and yellows to look at along with this ink, it's just going to have to speak for itself. So let's move on to the writing sample. And for that, we're using Rhodia number 16 dot pad paper with the Red Dragon Pen Co. Nymph and the Regalia Writing Labs epilogue. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the pen, swab, and drip sections here. As you can see, the ink is going to come out flat. There's not going to be much color variation unless you just completely pull the ink onto the paper, which has some artistic flair to it. And let's look at the dry time as well. When you're using it on the extra fine and fine, you're going to be looking at about 3 to 5 seconds for total dry. If you flip it over to a broad, double, or triple, then you're looking at almost 7 seconds for it to be dry, which is still not bad, but it really comes down to the nib that you're using, which in this case, I'm using a nib that gives me 2 separate looks. Actually, depending on the writing angle, gives me about 5 separate looks, which is really awesome. I mean, look right here. Because of how free-flowing this ink is, the extra fine's writing more like a fine, and the triple broad is writing more like a quadruple broad. Now, we're going to count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and no smudge. Which, for me, is worth the price of admission on this ink. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at one other thing here. As you can see on the Quick Brown Fox sample, there's actually a pretty good line to it. But if we zoom in a little and adjust everything so you can see it, if you look at the K, the P, and the F, you can notice that there's just a little bit of feathering. And it's always been that way with this ink, even on Rhodia paper. Let's zoom out and talk overall qualities before we talk about water. So it does have some feathering. There's no shading, sheen, or shimmer. But overall, I would say that this is a work-safe ink as long as blue or black are not required and if you can get a fine enough nib. For the water, though, let's head on over to the kitchen sink. To be fair, I already had some preconceived notions of how this ink was going to react with water. After all, this is the ink that, thanks to some fluke chemical reactions that I still have yet to be able to repeat, ended up dissolving a corner out of one of my messenger bags. So I was going to be a lot more persistent on trying to destroy this ink because I knew that it would be rather resilient towards whatever I could throw at it. And the first thing we decided to throw at it this time was some household cleaner made by a rather big brand. So we go ahead and spray that onto the ink and get a good amount on the paper. Nothing else, just letting it soak in, see how much of the ink it takes with it. As you can see, the Organic Studio, the KWZ, the Retro 51 ink, they're all getting hit rather equally. And I go ahead and follow it up with some degreasing dish soap from a rather prominent brand. Why degreasing dish soap? Is there any other kind? Seriously, you get the best clean with degreasing dish soap. So let's go ahead, healthy amount on the paper, and I go ahead and get the pot scrubber to go ahead and work the soap into the paper, getting some good downstrokes, a couple side strokes, and then just going every way I can to try to work the soap into the fibers of the paper as best I can. One of two things is going to happen on this water test. Either the ink is going to give out or the paper is going to dissolve. Either way, I call it a successful test, but I want to make sure that I'm giving this ink a run for the money. So after we let it sit for a few seconds, and while I take this time to get the hose for the kitchen sink that I did not prep before the video, I wanted to take a few seconds here and tell you that this is probably one of the most favorite things I have filmed so far, even including stuff outside of stationery. Watch what happens when we soak the paper. And focus mainly on how the Organic Studio holds up, and then what happens to the Rome burning. So far, all 4 inks are still holding up. You can still read what you've done. And I go ahead and make sure that I'm getting a good even spread. At this point, I want to take a few seconds to talk about the best part of this ink. Watch as the Organic Studio ink and the KWZ ink, as well as just the paper in general, start to give way. At this point, you would expect that only the most resilient of inks is going to last. Case in point, the Retro 51. But look at what is happening with the Noodler's ink. As the gold completely disappears, the primary holding color is this very brilliant and regal purple. Honestly, I think this color is a lot better looking than the gold that the ink starts at. Which, I don't know. If Nathan could have found a way to reverse those where it started purple and worked to gold, I'd buy that ink too. But let's go ahead and dry off the paper. I mean, after all, I want you to be able to see the beauty of this pristine sheet of Rhodia dot pad paper. Just the majesty of the... Who am I kidding? The paper's ruined. Great job, past me. So there you have my review of Noodler's Rome Burning. To be honest, even if it hadn't been provided to me for review, I probably still would have bought a bottle for myself, because it's a good ink. If you want to grab a bottle of this ink, or a sample, head on over to penschle.com. And while you're there, don't forget to click on the radio podcast link at the top of the page and enter in Inktwell in the How You Heard About Us section. That way you can unlock a really good site-wide discount. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at the Inktwell. And also, you can find me at theinktwell.com or floor3media.com/theinktwell. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.